Our kills are okay because, one, we don't kill our own kind, and two, I feel all of those murders.
Right. Ooh,
so theoretically, like, they're feeling Hari's pain. It's weird and culty, and there's something going on.
Yeah, you hear the screams of the things. I'll be like, all right, I'm vegetarian now. See ya.
Hello and welcome to Road Goes Ever On and On. Today, Mark and I are talking about the thrilling science fiction TV series from Apple TV Plus, Foundation, Season 2, Episodes 6 and 7, so spoilers are ahead. And if you're enjoying our content, then a like would be appreciated. If you don't want to miss out on a single one of our breakdowns, then just be sure to subscribe and click the bell icon for notifications. And with that, what are your overall thoughts?
So, I like the show. I think the show overall is a good show. I do have maybe a few complaints with it. Overall, it's a beautiful show. I like how rich and in-depth this show feels. I like the different fauna that we get to see on different planets to make these worlds feel...
how beautiful the visuals are.
Oh, yeah. The CGI, when you see the ships jumping, it very well produced. Love the show in that aspect. The story feels a little bit like it drags a bit.
Okay.
It does seem that like the first season was all about the first crisis, and now it seems like we're kind of doing that again. And it's like almost we have like our same characters like with Gaal and Salvor, but then we also have like new characters, which kind of like the Cleons are new in a way. We have who he's marrying, Hober Mallow, and then the clerics. And it just seems that like it is a little bit hard to care for these characters because they're all kind of new. And it all just seems like we're kind of doing the same thing of like, oh, we're waiting for the crisis. And it's like, it feels almost like you get new characters like with Bel Rios and the Mentalics. And so it does seem the kind of fillery of like, this is just something in the way to get to the second crisis, but it isn't really necessarily like have anything to do with the crisis or the Foundation and Trantor like fighting each other.
I think part of, I'm actually very much enjoying, I don't have the same complaints, but I can kind of see where some of that can arise from. Because these two seasons, even though they have a lot of similarities, I think there's also some pretty big differences in, first of all, like the way that the seasons are framed are very different. Because like the last season started from one central point and split from there. And so the different storylines and the different worlds all kind of split from that, Hari trying to start the Foundation and the attack on Trantor and then like everything that came from there. And so those parallel storylines didn't always feel like they were connected, but you at least saw how they started in the beginning. You didn't see why we would continue to follow them because you didn't know where they were going, but they at least had that common thread. Now with like this season, it's so far past like last season that these stories just feel kind of disconnected and you're wondering how they come together. You don't like that common thread is so far away. It's almost like you're watching three different shows at the same time and it just kind of like keeps cutting between them. Yeah. And maybe some of the storylines are more interesting than the others. And so you're like, oh, well, maybe just give me this one because that's the one I'm engaged in. But I do feel like with this episode, the last episode, that we are at least seeing how like two of the threads are coming together because we are finally seeing like the magicians on Trantor and that Hari on Trantor. And so we are seeing like two of the threads coming together. Still don't know how second Foundation and like Gaal, Salvor, and physical Hari are going to connect with everything. That still seems like a very disconnected thread. So I can kind of see that.
Yeah, it also kind of feels a lot like the first season where it's just like there's a lot of mystery between things. And like each episode, you kind of have to introduce like, oh, here's the story of Hober Mallow and here's a little bit of backstory of where he came from. And Bel Rios and where he came from, and they're on a side quest on Siwenna that, like I don't necessarily feel like it's got like, it doesn't feel really high stakes for me. Like they have this huge like story and this giant galaxy and all of these problems that are going to happen even 100 years from now.
Yeah.
And so it's like, okay, and we know that Gaal will survive to there and Salvor will be there and maybe they can change it, maybe they can't. And it just feels like the first one, the crisis felt so big, dealing with the first crisis.
Yeah.
And they dealt with the crisis, but then it was like there was really didn't feel like repercussions from that crisis. Like it was just like, oh, crisis was solved, it's fine. So like when you say there's another crisis, it's like, okay, we're just going to solve it in the last episode and then next season have a third crisis on the way. That's my one little hang up with the show. Other than that, like phenomenal acting, the writing is still really good when they are, having dialogue and, tragic story about what happened to Hari. It is compelling, but I feel like to compare it to like early Game of Thrones, like that felt like such high stakes. People were dying left and right. And here's the other thing. Hari dies, but then he's back alive. So is he dead now? I don't know. Is Salvor dead? She's supposed to die by the mule. There's just, doesn't. Oh, good.
Do you think Hari's alive?
I feel like it would be kind of silly to bring him back alive and then kill him 2 episodes later. Like, why would there even be a point to having Hari have a body? So I did think it was kind of hilarious that they ended the episode 6 with Hari's death and then 7 with Salvor's death. And so at first I was thinking, there's no way he could survive this long of time.
Right.
We saw them have like a whole party. We saw him drown. Like, I don't think he's alive. But then she did it to Salvor and doesn't look like she's going to get helped. And I don't think Salvor is dying. So maybe this is just a projection of like before they landed on this planet of what's gonna happen. I don't know. But I don't think he's dead.
Yeah. In my head, at the end of episode 6, I was thinking Hari's not dead. Same reasons you said, like he just came back to life and now they're going to kill him. But then it also seemed kind of confirmed at the end of this episode 7, that, okay, he is actually dead. But then, you see that it looks like Salvor is going to die. And Dawn asked about the 2 deaths. And I was like, well, I mean, it looks like Hari's dead. They're not also going to kill Salvor, I don't think. And then the more I was thinking about it, I went back to like, they just brought Hari back to life. Like that's a pretty big thing. And we haven't even gotten to explore why he was brought to life. Who brought him to life?
Right.
There's so many questions around that are unanswered, that like not answering that and then killing him so shortly after bringing him back to life, not showing us his past until right as he's dying, just feels like a way to try and, play with our emotions.
Right.
So I do wonder whether or not the Prime Radiant was potentially able to predict this stuff. And so Hari being real, maybe that was like bait, And so it's like, yes, there is a real Hari, but also there's still a copy of Hari on the Prime Radiant. And so, this like physical Hari is being used as bait, knowing that, bad stuff happens to bait, but we've got to back up. And it seems like Gaal knows something. She's in her focus state of like counting primes. She told Salvor, you don't have to trust them, but you should trust me. And don't pull on this thread right now. So I think she might actually have some idea of what's going on and is doing a pretty good job of playing along to see what the end game is. Because like there's something weird going on with this group, right?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, they're definitely they act kind of like they're trustworthy, but also
Yes.
they're really giving me X-Men vibes, and like, but like the Magneto version of X-Men, where she's Magneto, and she's like, oh, I'm not a killer, like I'm not gonna kill my own kind, but the inferior kind, like I'm going to do that because we've been victims. It gives it very much like X-Men Magneto. That's what they're kind of doing.
And like, and our kills are okay because one, we don't kill our own kind, and two, I feel all of those murders.
Right. Ooh,
so it,
Yeah, and you hear the screams of the things. I'll be like, all right, I'm vegetarian now. See ya.
But so like theoretically, like they're feeling Hari's pain, and so they're saying like, oh well, we wouldn't do this too much. Like we wouldn't even kill others too much because we would feel all that pain. It's weird and culty, and there's something going on. It feels like they think they can brainwash these two and then use them. I don't know if Tellem is really planning on ceding her position to
I think
to Gaal.
I think it's more of just because in that last episode before 6, at the very end, she's like, we want the Prime Radiant. And like, is it just to destroy the Prime Radiant, to use the Prime Radiant? And is she using Gaal to get to the Prime Radiant? Because if you have psychohistory on one hand with the Prime Radiant, and you have these abilities, to me, putting those together could create some crazy powerful force that would be unstoppable. Also, why I kind of don't think Hari is dead. There was, in the previous episodes, the really interesting stuff with like him and Raish, and like him like re-having a body and like re-feeling his death and having the memories like come back and like existing 200 years later. And the like moment that he had with like Ghost Raish, it feels like there is more to that. So I don't necessarily think we can just like, well, he was here, he talked to Raish, now he's dead. It's fine. So I still think Hari is alive.
Yeah, I think Salvor is at a disadvantage on this planet because like one of her one, she's good with her instincts, and like two, she knows how to read people, but these people can close off their minds versus, so like not being able to read people, she's just kind of like a normal person on this planet.
Yeah.
Versus I think Gaal can like go into her mind palace of like, counting the primes. And I think that can like pull her in somewhere deep enough that she's like a little bit walled. Because it does feel like she is still hiding something from them, that there's something that they want inside of her head and not just her ability to predict the future. And I think she potentially has that guarded. So I think in this grouping, Gaal kind of still has powers while Salvor is almost like a normal person.
I do think that they want to use Gaal because there did seem to be a like excited moment from, what's her name? Tellem, that when she said, you can see the future, she perked up about that. So it's almost like they have these mind abilities where they can like move stuff and talk to people and hear things, but they can't necessarily like see into the future. And I think they're trying to use Gaal's ability to see in the future to rise to power. I don't know what their end goal is.
Yeah. And it seems like all the people have, I don't know if everybody has a different power or if there's just a wide mix of powers. Like there's, this person can change their appearance. This person can put you to sleep. This person can make you see things. Like it seems like there's a whole range, and that there's like different echelons of power because, like you said, like they definitely seem like they want Gaal's power. Like that's a strong one. I don't think they're as interested in Salvor's.
Yeah.
Potentially they may not understand its strength. I think she's got a very good power. It's just like sometimes you have to understand what you can do with it. But I do think that like with these range of powers, it also means that there's somebody on there that's like technically powered, but not like the most useful power. You know, like
Right.
there's somebody who their power is like they know what meal is in your lunchbox.
Yes. Yeah.
You know?
Or
It's
like I can make a plant grow approximately 0.25% faster.
Yes.
Just like the dumbest powers.
Yeah. But it definitely feels culty because like they're still trying to make them like they're trying to make Gaal feel special and like, oh, you're a special person. But then in the end, they're trying to make them all the same, you know, like it doesn't feel like they're celebrating the like different backgrounds they come from and like ways of doing things. Instead, it's like, you know, you must come to our way of like understanding the pain of everything, and like we'll open you up. And like it does kind of seem like they're all just kind of removing the individuality, which then makes it easier to manipulate people when they don't have a self. When like any time that you need to make a decision, instead of doing it yourself, like you understand, oh, I need to go to the elder, you know, and the elder will tell me what to do.
Right. And you can tell that the whole practice is steeped in manipulation. Like they manipulated Salvor with the Hugo. They manipulated both of them by showing Hari leaving. They manipulated all three of them with them showing the young princess. And so like they're always, from the beginning, they haven't been telling truths. So
yes,
trusting them, and you know, hopefully Gaal's got it, but also Gaal has kind of acted very immaturely throughout the series, of like very passionate about like her emotions, and that has led to problems like with her seeing Raish and getting, you know, launched to the Raven and not wanting to work with Hari at the Raven. Like she's very shown that she is not, that she really relies on emotion sometimes and will act accordingly because of that. So I feel like I have a hard time trusting her being like, I know what I'm doing with these people, like don't worry about it. So I don't know.
Yeah. And once again, kind of like what you were saying about some of your issues, like I can see that the stakes are so different. The stakes feel like the stakes in this like galaxy where it's like it's so spread out, you know, like right now they're less worried about the second crisis because they probably aren't going to be able to get there in time, and they're focused on, you know, like the mule 120 whatever years in the future. And there are still like smaller stakes, but they're like immediate stakes, but they're like the smaller stakes of just like the lives of these three people, you know, like Hari might die, Salvor might die, but it doesn't feel like the weight of the galaxy, you know, like that's way out there. And we don't know how this story is going to connect with the other stories. So it does feel like a very separate thread. I think by the end of the season, I do think it'll be brought in somehow. Because I mean the whole point is like the second foundation has an impact on the first foundation. And I think it'll need to do that. We just don't understand like how or why.
Sure. And I think like it feels, you know, there is that disjointed between the two seasons. I think about like, say, the very first episode of Foundation where they blew up the elevator, right?
Yeah.
That felt like such a huge, like, this is going to be like a huge recurring thing that we're going to have to deal with. And it was literally just that moment so that Cleon could punish the Thespians and Arrakis. I probably forgot those names. Thespians.
Thespians. Thespians are actors. And sure, maybe we punish them too.
Yeah.
Who knows?
Take them all out. And Arrakis, right?
Was the other I honestly don't remember the other one.
Because that was, and remember they were such a huge deal with they were coming and they were hunting the Foundation, and then it's like, and now we don't even talk about them.
But we do.
I mean,
it turns out that brother is a Thespin.
Yes, they're Thespins,
and like the way that day Cleon, whatever, dealt with that bridge exploding, ended up causing this huge conflict that has caused that end of the galaxy to split off from Empire. You know, I like it caused this like huge outrage, and that's like the first seeding of Empire shrinking.
Yeah, I guess, but like also like I felt like the Invictus was such a big thing, and like
Yeah,
we never talked about the Invictus again. And I'm assuming that the idea of the Invictus was they got that so they could get the technology and learn how to do the jumping without spacers. Like
yeah,
I
that's
think
my assumption.
What that's for, but like it felt like the Invictus was such a huge like we need this because it's going to be imperative in our fight against Empire. And then it's like we never brought it up again. And maybe it was just to get the jumping technology, but it felt like it was such a huge warship that had been missing. They talked about like taking the Invictus to the front door of Trantor, and it's just like we don't even see the ship again. And that's where I think that's my problem is like it created these like high stakes in the first season with these, you know, Thespins and Arachnian or not, that's a spider.
Yeah.
Whatever they were.
Yeah.
But like now it's like we don't even talk about them. And it has felt like the first crisis felt so like real, and like this crisis doesn't really feel like I can't imagine them being like, we show up on Terminus, they have to deal with this. Like we haven't even been on Terminus this whole show really. So
right.
That's where I have my difficulties with.
It was interesting that when Hari spoke with Cleon in this episode,
mm-hmm.
that he said, you know, the reason we sue for peace is something like isn't because we need it or want it, but because we know that we could win with war. And who knows, maybe he's just like, maybe that's just talk in order to scare them from like coming too close to Foundation and seeing what they really have. But potentially, you know, the Foundation took that technology from the Invictus, and they've maybe made a whole fleet of ships like that, you know, that not only can jump without spacers, but there was a line about like the fold created by that ship was like smaller or more precise than anything the spacers could do.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not just that like it can do it without spacers, it's that it can do it better.
Yeah.
So it's interesting that like we're hearing this stuff, we're not seeing it yet, you know? So it's like these whispers that you have to pay close attention to realize that like the Foundation might be friggin' huge.
Might be.
And it sounds like based off of like the way that the cleric was kind of like shit talking the Foundation, you know, for like not following Hari's original purpose. It sounds like the Foundation has been focused more on getting ready for war. You know, that they know that the second crisis is going to be something tough to deal with. And so like their thing has been focused more on like a military front.
Right. It does feel a little hard to believe, like they have the technology of the Invictus, but it does feel a little bit hard to believe in 100 years that this outpost that was struggling to survive can already like outdo all of the technology of Empire. Like that.
They're science nerds.
I guess, but it just, that feels, if you think about like the Empire as a whole, like planets among planets in the galaxy.
Yeah.
You would think that with them having all the technology that, you know, we see them built the rings, like they're not just like stopping progress. I mean, you know, maybe that there's an embargo on completely no studying, but there's universities everywhere. Like the amount of people that are in the galaxy, you would assume would be working alongside creating new technologies, you know, for Empire. And so an outskirt, like, and just based on time alone, like, you know, there was like 100 years on Terminus before the vault opened the first time, another 100 years. It feels almost too short to be able to have an army that would destroy Empire.
The thing is, I think if if the empire is kind of based off of like the Roman Empire, and we look at like the Romans and their achievements, the Romans, even though they achieved a ton, they weren't, for the most part, they weren't like philosophers, scientists. They were engineers. They built things, and that allowed them to do a lot, because they built the roads that connected all of these places so they could move their armies, their people. They built like the aqueducts so that they could, so that life could thrive in the places that they were in. But they didn't necessarily invest in like science, and so they didn't, their culture didn't grow a lot in other ways, because they were more of just kind of like builders.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like that's kind of like this one. Like, they've built lots of impressive things, but then, Hari's science says this one thing, and it's something that they don't like, and they're like, no, we got to suppress that. Versus like, well, if it's a truth, then we should explore it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's kind of what they're like. So I think that, while they have accomplished a lot, their growth is kind of stunted because they won't explore certain things if it like goes against their beliefs. And they don't necessarily, I think, encourage scientists, because like that involves allowing like open exploration of knowledge. You see it with the fact that like there's spies in the universities that like report back on what these people are learning and studying.
One quick note on that spy. You know who that was, right?
Not initially.
I knew it right away.
Oh, it was like itch in the back of my brain. It was driving me nuts. I actually had to look it up the second time through. I was like,
Hyde?
Who is this? I know.
I knew it instantly. I was like, that's Jessica Hyde. It's all connected.
It's all connected. I was talking with Dawn like the last video about like worlds colliding. I don't remember what all the things were, but yeah, in this one we're seeing like our first show that we talked about, Utopia. We're seeing the character from that come back. Hilarious. But like that's Hari's like origin story about like why he's like I think that kind of shows off like why he's so callous with like he lost, I think, his connection that grounded him in this world.
Sure. Now, do you think that also blinds Hari a little bit? Like, imagine you come up with psychohistory, right? And you can predict the numbers, but he is kind of have a vendetta against the Empire. So, like, What if, like, because Hari has such a vendetta and, figures out psychohistory, that has created this, like, adversarial thing against Empire, and him being like, we need to go because it's going to fall, but it was all going to fall because Hari's frustration with Empire because of what Empire took from him.
I mean, it's possible. It's possible that if he, if he were working for the Empire, that he would search for an alternative.
Mm-hmm.
But it does seem like his psychohistory is almost inescapable, if not for the fact that there are, gifted individuals that can kind of like break it. But he didn't even know about that. I think he really believed. I mean, he staked his life on it by like twice standing in like the herd.
Mm-hmm.
So like I think he really believed that like his math was a singular explanation of what will come.
Yeah. Going back to the scene where Cleon was talking to Hari, one of the best lines was in that moment, and I thought it was great. When Cleon looks at Hari after he like electrocutes him, and he's like, what kind of man are you, keeping things from your elders and then using a woman, which is exactly what he's doing to
Sareth.
They zoomed in, so when he said it, they went to dusk.
Oh,
because the elder who he's keeping in the dark, And then it went to Demrazel, who in a way he's also using, but he's also using Sareth. So I love that Day was calling him, "What kind of man are you?"
Yep.
And he called him out for doing exactly what he's doing. And I was like, oh, Day, you are full of hubris.
Oh yeah. I won't go deep into politics, but I definitely see parallels of like people that condemn the actions of others, and it's like you do that same thing, right?
That's exactly
like
what you're doing.
You did that like last week or last month or last year. Yes, but they'll like publicly decry, and 1,000%.
Yeah, but moments like that, I love this show. It's great. So
yeah, that was definitely surprising. I mean, it's not a surprise that Hari would use somebody like that, and like put somebody in danger like that, but still was surprising to see it happen.
Yeah, I like the two clerics. I like Constant, and I like Polly, and I'm very nervous for them being on Trantor. Like, how do you get out of this? They are captured by the Empire. I don't know.
But you did see that, like, they were imprisoned. They weren't tortured. They weren't executed, anything like that. And it seems like their fate right now is just being imprisoned again, because I think with all the power that Empire has, he does know that Hari is a very dangerous opponent.
Mm-hmm.
And so he's not going to do anything with these two until he knows like the full extent of what Hari could do. So it's like all he can do is just hold on to them. Because what if he needs them for a bargaining chip? What if he needs more information? What if he...
But don't you also think that, like, he could just take their memory logs? Like...
Do they...
So I don't know how the technology works.
Yeah.
But it did make it seem like he could take the memories from... Like, it's like, okay, there's the Cleons that have the memories for sure because they're all part of the Empire. But, like, also, it did seem like the guards and potentially Sareth he could get memories from. So I don't know if it's, like, something that everybody in the Empire has and maybe people in Foundation don't have it. But to me, it seemed like they had technology that could just take your memories.
I don't know if he could get it from Sareth. I think it was definitely implied that it was, like, everybody in the employ of Empire.
Okay.
Because it was, like, everybody...
Maybe it's special technology then. That would make more sense of why he doesn't just take their memories.
Yeah, and I think that's like with anybody that's employed by Empire, I think that stuff is like automatically uploaded as soon as you get next to certain terminals, or like as soon as you're in like Wi-Fi of the palace.
Okay.
Because I think that's how that one dude was able to deal with it. He was like, they're going to have access to my memories. And Sareth was like, we can, what? I don't know. Now that you point that out, because Sareth did say the thing about like, oh, our people have had to deal with that. And that's why we built the technology to like counter it and erase it. I don't know. That's a good question.
And of course it makes a better show if they have to like question them and they can't just take their memories. Maybe it's something of all like big houses of Empire and people on the outskirts of Foundation don't have to worry about it. But that was my one question. The other, this is a wackadoo theory, and I don't know if it's related to anything, but speaking of, there was the guy that was afraid of his memories being seen by Empire, who was going to work for Sareth. He had a scarred face.
Yes.
And I was wondering if he was a Mentalic.
Yeah.
Because all of the other Mentalics were all scarred and stuff. I don't know. I mean, he could just be a warrior that got fought. Yeah. But it made me think about, I was like, I wonder if he has Mentalic abilities, and maybe the Mentalics are working with Sareth potentially.
Okay.
And that's I don't know. That's my wild theory. I don't necessarily necessarily believe it myself. It was just something I noticed that made me go, huh.
Yeah. I loved this episode. So, like, one of the things I love about the show, the world building, you know?
So good.
And, you know, it feels like it continues to surprise us with new things. And ever since the first episode of the first season, I've been itching to learn more about the Spacers. And I love what we are seeing about the Spacers. First of all, there was in one of these last few episodes was the first time I've seen that they have like the like holes in them. I don't think that was the case last season. So I don't know if that's like their technology to like upgrade themselves, you know, has improved and that's why that's there, or if I just didn't notice it. We hadn't heard their names before, I don't think, in last season.
Mm-hmm.
And seeing like the way that they move and hearing this thing about the fact that they're like a people that have a need to flow into the universe, and that's something that's being stopped by Empire. Like there's a certain beauty to that, and it does feel like they are people that are being abused by Empire, and it's a cool storyline, and I really like it.
Yeah, no, I love the Spacer stuff. I like that it kind of, they give you this feeling that they're almost like Hive-like they call them the Swarm. Their ship kind of looked a little bit like a beehive, and it seems like they're all kind of like working together, and like almost like you know, the other Spacers are like drones or worker bees that are just doing stuff, and like maybe that lady that we saw is like the queen bee. You know, they do say they're just humans, but
right,
they are, but they aren't. They're like this completely different thing.
Yeah.
And it lends credence to the like why they haven't tried to figure out space travel without Spacers, because it seems like they have this good thing going where it's like we've got them locked in on, you know, they give us 10% of their people and we give them, you know, this stuff that they need, and it's a perfect thing. And why would we need technology without them? We can just use them. Plus they can't leave us and then be a thorn in our side later. So that does lend credence to the why there's been kind of like a stop on advancement.
Yeah. I think that is kind of an example of why, you know, Empire doesn't need to advance that technology because they thought they were the only ones with that technology.
Right.
You know, like that's one of the ways that they can control the galaxy, is it's like it's such a strong technology and they have a stranglehold on it. And I guarantee you that because they have spies in universities, if anybody started trying to like study technology like that, even if it was like from a purely scholarly aspect of like wanting to just, you know, learn information that's not out there, I guarantee you that Empire would shut that down. Meanwhile, you know, the Foundation that Empire doesn't think about, like they have the ability to explore sciences without being stymied by this idea of like, that's against the Empire, you know? So like they've been able to grow in areas like that.
That's fair. You know, and again, they all could just be lying, you know? They could just be hyping it up. You know, in knowing that like Belrios is going to probably flip sides, and he was like a commander guy. He probably has a lot of sway on a lot of the Imperium. So maybe knowing things like that is like why we know we could win the war. And I think that makes it feel a little bit more tangible to me to be like, oh, this is believable.
I didn't think about Bell flipping sides, which is funny because like you definitely see him struggling with the weight of that decision.
Yeah.
And I think you might be right, which then also makes me wonder, do you think Dem knew that might be the case? Demerzel, sorry. I shouldn't be so
casual,
so informal, so casual with her.
You know, it's really odd that it does feel like this Demerzel is a very different Demerzel than last season.
Yeah, it does.
The first Demerzel felt very mother-like to Empire, very caring, very sweet, and very much like whatever the best you think. And now we got a Demerzel that is shacking up with Empire, and she almost kind of feels like she's calling a lot of shots and like
it does feel
making a lot of calls, and it just seems like a very different version of her. And I don't know if that's intentional or if she just feels threatened because of Sareth. I don't know.
Yeah, it doesn't feel like she had the authority to confirm to Sareth that she killed all of those people. That seems like a decision that she just took on herself.
Right.
You know, versus like a lot of the decisions, she's at least like, it seems like she's guiding Day to make this choice or that choice, versus that one seemed pretty bold to just make that decision on her own. It does feel like she has an agenda, and I don't know what that agenda is.
Yeah, it seems weird, and it feels like a completely Demerzel. Like the actress that plays her, phenomenal job, because it still feels like her, but like also different, which is crazy.
Yeah.
And okay, correct me if I'm wrong. Did Isaac Asimov, did he write iRobot?
I think he did.
Because if he did, there is that cool little Easter egg. Maybe it's an Easter egg, maybe it's not. Demerzel talks about when she calls her out for being a robot. Demerzel talks about that she was bound by 3 rules, which there's the 3 rules of iRobot, which is can't hurt a person, can't put a person in danger, yada, yada, yada. So I don't know if in the book Foundation they talk about the 3 rules, but it is a cool little Easter egg if it is.
Yeah, I do wonder about this. So the 3 Foundation books, I think I haven't read them. I don't think they're huge books. And the impression that I get is that they are kind of like this show, that they're like not immediate sequels. You know, it's not like Foundation Part 1, Foundation Part 2, Foundation Part 3, you know, and more of like maybe 3 books that take place in this galaxy, you know, where the events from one kind of affect the state of things that start off in the other one, but aren't necessarily like direct film. And I do believe that this series came up with the whole like day, dawn, dusk thing. I don't think that's in there. I think there are just straight up like different emperors.
Gotcha. Okay.
In the Foundation books. But now that you ask that, I am curious about like if that feels like something that the showrunners added as like a nod to
Isaac
Asimov. Yeah.
That's kind of what I was thinking, and I didn't know for sure, but I was just like, that's a cool little touch. I like that.
Yes. And it's interesting that like that they explicitly pointed out that change from the robots used to follow all of them, but she only follows the one, you know, and that seems like something that probably came out after the uprising.
Right. And now she only listens to Empire. Yeah. Yeah. I have one last crackpot theory.
Okay. Love theories.
We'll see.
The wilder, the funner.
And it comes back to a first theory that I had in the first season.
Okay.
I still think Hugo is the mule. And here's my reasoning.
Okay.
Hugo was Thespin.
Okay. Yeah,
he had the blue eyes.
Yeah.
The mule had the blue eyes, the Thespin eyes.
Okay.
I know that they are different actors. I'm pretty sure I know the mule actor from a show called Sex Education.
Okay.
I'm pretty sure I know who that guy is. When I first saw Hugo as the guy that changed his face into Hugo, I was like, Hugo is alive, you know, and I started thinking, I was like, wait a minute. Hugo could be asleep. He could also be awake at certain times.
I mean, they did point out the fact that he has been around longer than he is old because of the type of stuff he does means he has to do this long travel, and that it was not the like light speed travel, So he like gets put to sleep and then his thing just travels for a long period of time. And then he wakes up, he hasn't really aged.
And we see somehow Polly was able to live over 100 years and still be like, what, in his 60s maybe?
Yeah. So there's definite possibility that he could be alive.
So, and the fact that we saw him, like his actor came back to just do this bit part, makes me feel like we'll see that version of Hugo again. And he is actually the mule. And he is maybe like enraged because he thinks Salvor is dead or something. And in his rage accidentally kills Salvor, maybe. I don't know. Or Salvor's death is metaphorical because she has so much love for Hugo and she sees what he has become. And so she's not dead because he killed her, but she's like dead inside because he loves her.
Okay.
Crackpot theory.
Crackpot theory. If not for the different actor, I would really like that.
But we see Day have different actors for his younger self and older self.
Okay. Interesting.
Oh, and we see different actors for young Polly and old Polly. So we could see, because they're trying to get an older, broken version of Hugo, and that's maybe why.
Okay. The last little thing that I want to bring up, so this was from episode 6, I think, right before the clerics are captured. I really liked Polly's thing about belief versus faith. I've mentioned before the interesting differences between like religion and science in this show, and the fact that sometimes it's treated as real and sometimes it's treated as, kind of like the faith that's come up around Hari, where that clearly seems not real, but people believe in it. I really like that distinction of like, I believe, but still your faith is stronger than that. Like, I believe because I saw it. I know it's true. Yeah. You've heard like second and third hand accounts, and yet you still have faith, and your faith is stronger than my belief.
Right.
It's kind of interesting commentary on religion. And I feel like I don't know. I feel like this is very careful about the way it talks about religion. Like I do think that some things are kind of parallel to the way that atheists might view religion, that they can be formed around real events that kind of get twisted over time. And then, people kind of blindly follow that. And so I do feel like some of it looks like that, but then I don't feel like they're callous or mean about that portrayal. And I do think that they then also kind of make it seem like, but also some of this stuff could be real because like there are kind of powers. So it both seems like an interesting way to talk about religion that is potentially open to both sides, isn't like choosing one, and is, I think, being respectful about the way it portrays both sides. And that's wild to me.
Yeah, no, I think they do treat religion in this show like not as, a joke, like that people that believe religion are foolish, like especially like they in this episodes but Hari talks about that he was a messianic figure where he was able to die and be resurrected. In a sense, like, yeah, maybe science did all that. Maybe it was a higher being, potentially. But the people that believe in that are not looked down upon. It's just what they're given. It's just like what happens. And like, if you or I saw somebody that died and was resurrected, like, I feel like you and I would be believers. And even if there was an explanation to it of like, this person, was almost dead, but not really dead, but they look dead to us. Like, to us, it would be a full-on religious experience. And, I think with like Constant, she is a great like person of that. Like she's this like deep believer in the Hari Seldom faith, and so she is all of her actions and all of her goals are related to spreading this faith because she believes it so much. And it almost seems like she believes it more than her dad. Like her dad seems very like corporate in a way, very business, and she is a devout believer who, you know, she seems like the best of us.
Yeah, and she isn't made to look dumb or silly for having that faith. So like it isn't looking down on those people at all. I feel like this is a very respectful conversation around something that on both sides can be a very touchy subject for people.
Yeah, and it's very cool to see how to deal with religion in a way where, like, if you think about like the world, right? There's kind of like one religion and like different branches of it and like different kind of beliefs. Sorry, there's not one religion. There's like 3,000 religions, but like there's a lot of religions that take inspiration from one singular religion.
Yes.
It's more what I meant.
Well, I mean, I think like the three biggest all kind of came from the same three of the biggest. I don't know if they're like all of them are the three biggest, but like three of the biggest all kind of came from the same place. And so it does feel like that huge thing is kind of, I don't I want to be respectful of it too.
Yeah, we're being respectful. We love all people, whatever you want to practice. We support you. We love it all.
Yeah.
But it is cool seeing how this show deals with something on such like a grandiose scale where like entire planets have different religions, like the priests of Synax who believe in the water and don't believe in science. And then there's the mother, the maiden, and the crone religion. Like there's all these different religions, and none of them is treated like they're the incorrect religion. They're all weighted with like, you're a man of faith and that is what it is. And, you know, more power to you. And it's really cool how this show does that.
You know, kind of talking about how culty this group is of Mentalics. Mm-hmm. It was weird to me that like Hari's death had to be so ritualistic, especially when you think about the fact that they can feel the pain of their deaths. So episode 7, when you see Salvor also potentially get killed, the one dude to the right of Tellem shed a tear.
He shed 2 tears.
Of like, I think feeling her pain. Mm-hmm. And so were they trying, was this like, you know how Gaal had to be like deprived of air in order to like go into that state to like see the future?
Yeah.
Was it something of like they were trying to extract information from Hari and they thought that potentially the only way to do it was to like put him through something horrific? And so that's why it was like so drawn out, because like, why can't they just like chop off his head, tie a thing around his, like tie concrete around his feet and throw him in the ocean? So it was very prolonged.
Well, one, I don't think they're the mafia, so they're not going to use concrete. But I actually think you might be onto something, because when we saw Hari almost drowning, that's when we got the flashback of Hari and his whole past, and they even bring up the like him killing the girl kind of thing, and maybe they were just like, he's focused on that part where he was killing her, but not what led up to it. So I'm wondering if they were trying to feel that what led up to that moment, him creating the Prime Radian,
right,
and him basically developing psychohistory. So
I like, because then it makes that scene make more sense, because it's not actually a flashback. Right. Instead, it is him flashing through his life as he realizes he's about to die, and them potentially reading it.
I feel like we knew most of that stuff. We knew he had a wife, Jana.
Jana.
whatever. We knew he had a wife. We knew he studied. We didn't know like really how he got to Trantor. Yeah. So I think that does like it wasn't, and there wasn't like a ton of information other than she was pregnant and that he developed the prime. Like we knew he developed the prime radiant at some point, but we didn't see like how he worked with her to develop it and how that there were spies coming after him. So I feel like that could have been just something that is part of the narrative of what they were trying to get out of him. I like that.
Right.
I think that's a great idea.
Yeah. And you helped me flesh it out because that's, I didn't think about like that they're extracting the scene we saw. So I like that.
Hell yeah.
Okay. This is boof.
Boof.
Okay. The surprise inspection, we'll call it. Very intrusive surprise inspection. Let's call it a surprise privates inspection.
Okay, gotcha.
That scene was awkward as hell. Like,
yeah,
there were so many people that were there.
Yeah. Imagine going to the gynecologist. First of all, just you and I imagine going to the gynecologist.
Right.
And then now imagine like 30 people watching you get.
That was, I thought that was awful. And then I don't think that this was meant to be funny, but I kind of thought it was. And by the way, like as a male, I don't mean like funny in a good way, but like weird, awkward, funny.
Disavow everything he says because he's a man.
So like the one doctor that's like doing the work. He says that his area of expertise is what is this? It's like reproductive and such like. So one, does he ever get to do any work? Like they're sterile and they're dudes, and Demerzel is a robot. So is he just like well studied but not well practiced? Or who knows, maybe he works on like other people in Empire, you know, like other people that are employed by Empire would go to him. But I don't know, it doesn't feel like the Cleons would trust their people with others. Like they wouldn't burden their best with like the peons. So I do wonder like how much actual experience he has.
Well, maybe not like the peons. Like think about in the first season, there was like the gardeners. Like maybe not the gardeners are not getting that, but like potentially, you know, we've seen others that have been close, like the lady that was teaching them how to have etiquette of like how they all have to do that. So maybe he's like the reproductive guy for like those types of people.
It's a very real possibility. It's that he does. But the other thing that kind of made me wonder was he was like reproductive and such like, which to me sounds kind of like and stuff, you know, like not very eloquent. Like, you know, I deal with like reproduction and stuff. You know, the down there's like, that's not how I would want my doctor to talk.
Wait,
you know, like I deal with like your guts and stuff, you know, like maybe stay away from my guts. Maybe bring in the guy who's like a little bit more eloquent.
Maybe what he was doing with her is the and such, and the reproductive he does is he grows the Cleons in tubes. Like that's him reproducing. Yeah. And the and such is like, oh, you know, I haven't looked at one of these since med school, but
that's what I'm saying. It's like I've seen lots of pictures.
Like, I can educated guess, maybe. Oh man, that's hilarious.
I know that's not the way it was intended, but that's the way I read it. Of just like, I don't want somebody to and such like when they're a doctor, you know, like
now and such like, you know, I can give you some medication and some stuff. You know? I don't know what the medications are called. It's just stuff.
Oh man, let me look at my book. Let me dust off my books. I really haven't dealt with this. It's been a long time since, you know.
that scene was just so awkward for me, and like especially
so
with
awkward.
the heat going between Demerzel and Sareth. So
Yeah.
like I felt uncomfortable for her, so I was just like, while I'm watching the scene, uncomfortable. So,
and they intentionally made it like the way that they cut that scene when they opened it, they just cut like hard cuts to 4 different people, all that were centered, and you're like, who are these people? Like, why? And then after it shows like 4 of these people, then it's like the big shot with all the people, and it's like, she didn't even know this was going to happen. Like, this is,
but to her credit, she was very strong. You know, I feel like
she is being very strong about this.
Well, we have seen a strength about her, you know, having her whole family killed and hearing the closeness as she described her family in this episode, where, you know, how her dad used to like be very kind to her, her sister who she admired, who had a young son. This whole time she's been very strong dealing with Empire. Even in her most vulnerable state, you know, millions of people around looking at her private parts, very vulnerable, but still strong that entire time. And it wasn't until Demerzel came to her and spoke to her. And that was the first time we've seen her break down and actually cry. Which gives a bit of humanity to her, because before we've seen her as kind of like, she's been very like playing 5D chess, you know, audio memories, going to his chamber, looking at all this stuff. Like, she has felt like she's been in the driver's seat for most of this arranged marriage. But then seeing, you know, Demerzel just says one thing to her and it just broke her. Like, that was such a rough scene, but very, very good.
It was. And, you know, she's doing all of this without having been trained to be in this role. There was no chance that she was going to succeed the throne. And so she was off doing her own thing. And so I think she probably didn't get like a lot of the traditional, you know, schooling and studying that a soon to be royal would get. And so for that to be thrust upon her, like, she knows that he probably did it. Like, that was her thought. And she realized that she's kind of like a prisoner in this. And I think it would be so easy for most people to just crumble under that and just accept it. But she's actually being super smart about how she plays all the different sides of this to be able to, you know, find people to help her get the information, to like get truths out of people, that like all these scenes where we've seen her like have a rumor and be able to get that confirmed as truth. It's just, it's wild. She's killing it.
Yeah, she is. And I could see with her help, her almost being the downfall of Empire, of just sneaking in there and just wrecking everybody in there.
Right. And even the fact that she has this idea of like this bloodless coup.
Right.
She's a smart one.
She is. It is going to be interesting to see if we see every like last season we saw Dawn, who was the one that was kind of breaking with Empire, and she uses a little manipulation again on Dawn, new Dawn.
Right. Yeah.
Maybe he's the one that breaks again.
Once again, I still can't read her on this. Like, is there some real kind of feelings between them, or is she just using him kind of like she's used his charm, you know, her charm to get things, you know, like it's tough to read her, other than when the one time that she broke, you know?
Yeah. I feel like she does seem like she comes from, like, she wasn't anywhere near the line of throne. She was doing her own thing. So she wasn't like raised in that you know, like the mentality of courting and politics.
Right.
And when she made the announcement to everybody, as they were proposing their marriage, you know, she kind of went past Day to be like, your concerns are our concerns. We want to fight for you people. So she seems more for the people,
Yes.
than Day.
Oh, yeah.
It seems like she just wants a better world, and if she needs to manipulate Empire to get it, I think she looks at Dawn and still sees Day, or like future Day. So even though she says he has kind eyes, I still think it is a manipulation tactic, right? Like,
okay.
How else better to disrupt Empire than be betrothed to Day, but then have Dawn's baby, and then Day finding out what kind of implosion would that make in the Empire itself for Cleons. Yeah. I think that is a huge bombshell. So I think that it has potential to, I think it's calculated.
I think she potentially might actually trust Day, because even though she knows that Day could become Dawn, that a number of things have to happen for that to happen. And that maybe that's just like something that happens to all or some or most of the Dawns because of the position that they're in and the way that like their Dusks groom them, and like their Dawn before them grooms them, or their Day before them grooms them, that they always end up kind of turning out the same.
Mm-hmm.
And so I do think that that she knows that like maybe with me and in a more compassionate, you know, kind of environment, that this could be a very different person.
Potentially, because it does also seem like her right-hand woman,
her enjoiner,
Rue, is manipulating Dusk a little bit. And so it seems like potentially, and Dusk and Dawn are kind of against Day now a little bit because of the memory logs. So it does seem like it could just be a master plan.
They're chipping away at both ends.
Uh-huh. So I feel like it feels calculated and planned.
Yeah.
But we'll see. We have 3 more episodes.
I know.
But with that, our journey has come to an end. Come back next week as we will tackle Foundation Season 2, Episode 8 and 9. And then after that, Episode 10. And after that, Foundation Season 3. We look forward to having you. But until then, I'm Mark. This is Sterling.
Thanks.